Okay. Hi, everybody. Good evening. I hope you guys are well. Hope you're safe. Hope you're healthy. Hope you're happy. Tonight's training is a skill-based training. Skill-based training. But before I get into it, what I want to know is this. What do you think is the greatest tool that you have access to when it comes to building your business with Isagenix? What do you believe is the greatest tool that you have access to? So Jesse says Our Easy Training. Antonio says the webinar, the pop. MC says the system. Brandy Beth says Eden and I. Ali says we were just talking about this, leveraging the Pivot on Purpose webinars. Okay, cool. Well, I will say this. I am very, very, very happy to know that the messaging has been received about the webinars, but it was a trick question. That is not the best tool that we have. That's not the best tool that you have access to. In fact, the best tool that you have access to grow a business is something that Antonio just said. And I think Sid said it as well. And that's our own story. The reality is, if you look at storytelling is what has shaped the world. You can go back thousands of years, no matter what your religious or spiritual beliefs are. And the reality is that the foundations of our entire world exists because of oral tradition, right? How many of you drop a one in the chat box? Remember in school, right? They said, here's how history started. It started with oral tradition, right? Oral storytelling, right? And then eventually they came to the point of hieroglyphics, right? And that eventually mutated into languages and things like that were written words. But oral storytelling was the way in which civilizations came to be. And the reality is, all of us have learned how to tell our own stories in our own lives. And I think sometimes what we forget is that storytelling is in and of itself the most powerful thing that we can do to move people, because through our own storytelling is where people can learn how to connect and relate to us. And so if you pay attention to the biggest kind of leaders in this company, you'll notice a through line. You'll notice all of us are fantastic at telling not just our story, but other stories. MC, stop passing notes. I don't know what's going on over there, but stop passing notes in class. I see you laughing over there. Stop passing notes in class. That's the best thing about Zoom. You can just call people out. You just see people laughing, so just stop passing notes, right? I don't know what you're doing. Antonio, I know you're in on it. Y'all just stop it right now, okay? I knew it. See, I knew it. I knew it. Okay, great. MC, your hair looks great according to Jesse, okay? Let's bring it back. So let's bring it back. Drop a 3 in the chat box if it's okay for us to have a familiarity with one another when it comes to making money and having a business, right? Drop a 3 in the chat box if it's okay for us to have a little bit of fun, right? Doesn't have to be so serious all the time. I think we have enough of that going around right now, and all the time. There's so much pressure, there's so much stress everywhere in the world. And I always want you guys to know that when you come here, that there's very much the intention of training and teaching and pouring belief and passing along experiences that we've had or other leaders that decide to train on these calls have had. But ultimately, this gets to be a place where making money is fun and having an impact is fun. And it can be done in a place where you do build that kind of familiarity with people on your team that become, friends and you're willing to have a good time with and things like that. So I'm glad that you guys are all feeling a little bit loose in that way. I'm never going to stop doing that, because one of the reasons I got out of the corporate world, the suit and tie, the straining of, the silencing of an individual voice just wasn't for me. And so that's great context, I guess, for this evening as well. So when it comes to telling your story, believe it or not, the reason that's the greatest attribute, the greatest tool that you have access to, is because that's the thing that people are going to listen to the hardest. And the reason that people are going to listen to your story the hardest is because they're going to want to see if they can see themselves in some way, shape, or form through the lens of your story and why you decided to do what you have done. Make no mistake that every major religion continues to flourish. Why? Because of personal testimony, right? So religions, we're not going to get into a whole conversation about religion, obviously, but religions grow and spread because missionaries who deeply believe in what they believe in go into other places, go into other worlds, and they tell their own personal testimony, their own personal story. And it's that belief, it's that idea of, wow, this person is sharing something with me. This person is sharing something with me that that inspires me, that appeals to me, that's clicking on certain triggers of my own pathology, my own psychology. It's waking me up to the reality that maybe what I've been looking for is now coming through this particular message or messenger, even though I didn't know it was going to come in this way, right? And I love what Antonio said. I've never heard anyone say I object to your story, right? Of course not. People are going to be willing to listen once you get into a conversation. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you some bullet points on a template, a very, very simple framework through which to tell your story. The real key to this, of course, like anything, is practice. Now, to be very, very clear, this is a template. It's a framework. It is flexible. It's malleable. Let it be authentic. Let it be true for you. Whatever I say, don't take it as gospel. Refine it. Feel into it. Get creative with it. Get clear on it, right? And yes, I will touch on that, right? And really, really kind of be with, without overthinking, be with what your story really means to you as you start to cultivate it and as you start to create it. Now, the real key though to proper storytelling is a couple of things. Is one, you've got to know that this type of story that I'm about to teach you how to share, you can do it in less than 90 seconds. Now, ultimately, why is it important to share your story in a very short period but impactful kind of way? Comes down to one thing and one thing only, and this is going to sound a little bit contradictory to something I just said, but ultimately, people don't care about your story. So it's a little bit paradoxical in nature, right? So your story is one of the greatest tools that you will ever have to help people understand why you're excited about this, why you're passionate about it, whatever it may be, and how they might be able to see yourself inside of it. But ultimately, they don't care about your story. And the reason they don't care about your story is because they care about WIIFM, what's in it for me, right? What's in it for me? And that's everyone's favorite radio station, no matter where you live in the world. And so in some ways it is like that, Carrie. In some ways it is an elevator pitch, right? It's to grab attention and pique curiosity and things of that nature. So I'm going to give you a very, very, very simple template on how to tell your story. And then Sid, I'll come back to what you had asked for as well in the chat box. So it's very simple. Now, you can have more than one variation of your story. You should have more than one variation of your story. The reason it's valuable to have multiple iterations of your story is because that way, when you're speaking to different people who come from different walks of life, you can do what's called mirror and match your story to their current level of predicament, interest, aspiration, whatever it may be. Does that make sense? Drop a 3 in the chat box if that makes sense, right? So we want to have multiple ways and multiple iterations of our story so that when we're connecting with somebody and we have the opportunity to share our stories, it's not just this cookie cutter blanket way of sharing our story. Because the reality is there is some of us in all of everyone that we encounter, and there is some of everyone that we encounter in all of us. How many of you understand that? How many of you have had the experience? Drop a 4 in the chat box. Or how many of you have started doing a little bit of personal growth work where you're kind of taking a look around and go, wow, everyone that I see in my own experience is in some way, shape, or form a reflection of who I am. And so that means if they're a reflection of who I am, then I must be a reflection of who they are. And so when we're willing to be flexible in our approach and flexible in our style, right, in the iterations of our story, and you don't need to have 100 SKUs, I'm talking about maybe like 2 to 3 varietals, then you have the ability to connect with anyone, anywhere, anytime, and inspire them within 90 seconds to want to know a little bit more about what it is that you're doing, okay? Now, again, it comes down to practice, practice, practice. And here's the template on the opportunity side of things that I'm gonna train on this evening. There are ways of telling your product story as well. Tonight we're gonna focus on the proper opportunity. That's good. The opportunity. Okay. Start a whole new niche. The opportunity. Okay. So tonight we're going to focus on the opportunity. Now, why does it make sense right now, especially considering what you guys wrote in the chat box? Why does it make sense to focus on how to tell your opportunity story? Because the reality is that we are where we are as a country and as a continent. We are where we are as a global community. we are where we are with what we're experiencing economically, right? And like Antonio said, people are looking for additional income. Okay, people are looking for additional income, but people are also looking for ways to work from home. It's no longer a trend like we talk about on the POP webinars, right? This is a very, very new reality and a necessity. Okay, so here's how this story goes. Now, the old way of saying it, okay, the old way of telling the story would sound something like this. It would sound something like, well, I'm a teacher by trade, okay? But I think we all agree that no one talks like that anymore, okay? No one talks like that anymore. I'm a teacher by trade. We're gonna modernize it a little bit, okay? Well, really simple, how do we modernize it? I've been a teacher for the past 5 years. I've been a teacher for the past 5 years. And for as much as I loved, or have loved, or for as passionate as I've been, or for as much as I've loved working with kids, or having a fixed schedule, or having the security of it, or, right? Just fill in the blank. For as much as I've loved blank, you're going to fill in those positive attributes. I got really tired of, or I'm really tired from, right? Either one. If you're still actively teaching, right, you'd say, I'm really tired of, or, if you've had a chance to replace your income and you're doing this full time or whatever it may be, right? I got really tired of educational bureaucracy, not being able to determine what my own syllabus would be, or the very stark reality that as a teacher, as you probably know, I'm severely undervalued and underpaid. Okay, whatever the pain point is. Or I got tired of being underpaid in exchange for being away from my family for hours on end. I got tired of, even when I was home, I was still away from my family because I had to be up all night working on papers or developing new materials. Okay, whatever those pain points are that that somebody would kind of relate to. Okay, so going back to the top, I've been a teacher for the past 5 years. And for as much as I loved blank and blank, I got really tired of experiencing blank, blank, and blank. Recently, or a year ago, 3 months ago, 6 weeks ago, whatever it may be, a friend of mine introduced me to the idea of building an online business in the wellness space. Now, this is where I want you to be authentic, and this is where I want you to be authentic the entire time. And some of you, you're seeing me style flex right now. Some of you have heard me do this story template before in a different way, but notice what I'm doing. Even now as I teach it, I'm flexing it a little bit because we have to stay relevant to what's going on in the world, okay? We have to be willing to talk about what people want to know about in terms of reality. So for example, this next part, when I first took a look at the information, admittedly, I wasn't sure whether or not it was for me, right? So if that's true for you, at first, I wasn't sure whether or not it was for me, okay? I'm gonna come back to that possibility, okay? Or you could say, as soon as I saw what was on the table, I knew it was exactly what I'd been looking for. Okay, so we're gonna play both of those out. So let's say at first, I wasn't sure if it was for me, right? At first, I wasn't sure if it was for me because I'm a teacher. I don't have any business skills. But what I found was, and what's so exciting, is that there's complete mentorship built in. So I'm learning from world-class experts how to be a business owner. I've only been doing it for X amount of time. And simply by following a proven system, I've already been able to create blank. Now that blank is going to be whatever it's going to be for you. And if what it is right now is and already I've been able to put myself in a position where I actually eat for free, then fantastic. I'm making enough money to pay off a credit card bill that was absolutely crushing my soul. I started to bring in enough to the point where it looks like come end of year, I actually won't have to return to teaching, okay, whatever it may be. Whatever it may be. Or you look at it and say, as soon as I reviewed the information, I knew exactly what it was, and I knew it was exactly what I'd been looking for. I couldn't be happier with my decision. I've only been at it for blah, 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 and here's what's happened already. So then, Jesse, what you'll do is you'll say the same thing inside of that for sure, right? I loved that I'd have access to world-class mentors. I loved that there was a proven system in place. I loved that I didn't have to know everything, and I could still earn while learning how to do something that was completely foreign to me, whatever it may be. And that's it. It's that simple. Now you can end a hook. You can add a hook on it to the end if you wanted to. You could ask the question, does that sound like something you'd be open to learning more about? Does that sound like something that excites you, right? Does that stir anything up inside of you? Or you can leave it. Or you can leave it, or you can leave it. It just depends on the context of the situation. But you'll learn. There's no hard, fast rule for anything, guys. And that's what I want you to remember, right? So the reason it's important to master that story and that template is because you might find yourself telling that story via voice note. Someone might say, well, tell me how you got started. You might be on a three-way call with one of your new partners and be like, hey, just real quick, here's how I got started, right? Whatever it may be. Okay. You may find yourself doing a one-to-one call where it's someone who you met online and you say, hey, let's hop on a call. And then you're inviting them to the webinar or whatever it may be. And you might share that iteration of your story before, right? Booking them to the webinar, whatever it may be. The key is it becomes a tool and it becomes your most powerful tool. The other key is how many times are you willing to practice it over and over and over again until how many times can you say your story like that? How many times can you say your story over and over and over and over and over again? Because it just becomes second nature to you. And that's when we become unconsciously competent, right? We just know how to do something because we've done it over and over and over again. Drop an S in the chat box for story if you guys feel a little bit more empowered in terms of how to share your story in a concrete, simplified way. Okay, is this helpful for you guys? Just go like this if I can see, for those that I can see on camera. Okay, the funny thing about this whole thing is we already know how to do this. How many of you guys know you already know how to tell stories? We already know how to tell stories, but we freeze up. We worry about judgment and rejection and blah, 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 right? We worry about all that stuff. But when we have a plan and we have a strategy, we have confidence. And so what you have now is you have a plan and you have a strategy. What's the plan? Study and practice. What's the strategy? Implement telling my story as many times as possible. So Lynn Hagedorn, number one income earner in the company, for those that don't know, Lynn Hagedorn, all she would constantly ask is, how many times has the Isagenix story been told? Or meaning, how many times has your Isagenix story been told? Every single day. How many times has your story been told? How many times has the Isagenix story been told? Now, when it comes to telling other people's stories, because this is equally important, because let's say, for example, let's say that I am talking to let's say I'm talking to an expectant mother, right? I'm talking to an expectant mother and she wants nothing more than to be able to be at home with her newborn baby and never miss a first, okay? Well, I don't have kids, right? We don't have children. And even if we did, I'm not a mom. I'm not a mom. So right, like Sid said, so whose story can I tell? I can tell Mac Funk's story. I can tell Sid's, or not Sid, excuse me. I can tell Allie's story, right? I can tell Paige's story. I can tell Brandy's story. I could tell Ellie's story. I could tell all these different stories, right? Of moms that are working from home because of this vehicle. And the simplest way to do it is just like this. Oh my God, you remind me so much of my friend Allie. Let me tell you about Allie. And now what am I going to do? I'm going to go right into that same template. Believe it or not, Allie was a medical device sales nurse for several years, but she got tired. She got tired of the corporate politics. She got tired of feeling like she was burnt out every day. And more than anything, she knew that at some point she was going to want to start a family and be able to be at home with her baby. Well, she plugged into all of our systems, and just a couple of years later, and you guys hear me tell these stories on the POP webinars, which is another reason it's great to get on the webinars, because I do my best, I try my best to rotate stories. And I'm not just rotating stories, just so we're all clear, just so you guys know, I'm always going to be transparent with how I train and why I do what I do, so you guys can learn it and over time implement it into your own businesses. But part of the reason I rotate stories is, one, why would I rotate stories? One, because I never know what types of people are going to be on there, right? So I'm always, I'm always including new stories to the best of my ability, but I'm also doing it for you from a training perspective, so that you can go, oh, gosh, he just told Vanessa's story tonight. That reminds me of my personal trainer that I want to go talk with. So now I can go tell Vanessa's story because I feel more empowered to tell it in a simple way. Oh, he told Sarah's story. He told Jesse's story. He told MC's story, whatever may be, right? You remind me so much of my friend blank. Let me tell you about blank. That's it. It's so simple and it's so powerful, and your story will always be the most effective tool that you have. Always. If you get great at telling your story and the stories of other people, you will move mountains. And how do you get great? You practice. You just practice. And you practice over and over and over and over until. And guess what happens when you practice? You suck. And you stumble. And you choke on your words. And you leave the situation, and you doubt yourself, and you question it, and could I have done better, and should I have done better, and what would I have said, and blah, 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 blah. Now, how do I know that you're going to suck in the beginning? How do I know? How do I know you're going to question yourself and doubt yourself and second guess everything that you did? Because I used to suck. And there are a lot of days where I still suck. Make no mistake. Please hear me loud and clear. I've been doing this for years and years and years. Make no mistake. There are still times where I'll meet somebody at a coffee shop. What do you do? And it's just like, the mechanism stops working. It just stops, because that's being human, and that's part of it. And it's important that you pat yourself on the back instead of beating yourself over the head when you mess up, because there is all the growth, all the learning, all of the ability to perform better for the most part than you do in the beginning comes from the willingness to fail as fast as humanly possible. Fail as fast as humanly possible. I assure you, I've failed my way to freedom. And why was I willing to fail my way to freedom? One reason and one reason only. To me, I didn't care about looking bad. It's not that I didn't care, I just didn't care as much about the other thing I cared about. And the thing I cared about more than anything in my life was I was terrified, not of what people would say to me, not of people rejecting me, not of people laughing at me, not of people making fun of me behind my back. All of those things happened again and again and again and again. But what terrified me was what Antonio said. What terrified me was laying on my deathbed, looking back and wondering what could have been had I not been scared of these 4 things. That terrified me. So when you get stuck, when you get nervous, when you hesitate, when you second guess yourself, when you say, okay, I'm gonna go tell my story today, and you freeze, I just want you to stop. I want you to check in. I want you to get grounded. I want you to take a deep breath. And then what I want you to picture, visualize, is I want you to visualize yourself on your deathbed. I want you to think about it. I do. And I want you to ask yourself the question, what do I value more? What do I value more? Being able to look back on my life and know that I took action in spite of my fears, to know that I took action in spite of other people's opinions, to know that I lived the life that I always wanted to live because I was willing to just say yes to myself and figure out the rest? Or do I value Becky from accounting's opinion? And I'm going to let that stop me. Damn it, Becky. What do I value more? What do I value more? And when you start to hold yourself to that level of personal responsibility, and when you start to hold yourself to the level of reality that says that our life is the culmination of our choices, and when we become present to that reality, that our life is the culmination of our choices, our life is the sum of our choices, plain and simple. Choice plus choice plus choice plus choice plus choice equals result. It's a very, very simple formula, at least in the context of the things we can control. So what choices are you willing to make today so that you don't have a regret someday down the road? That's all you got to ask yourself. So again, some of you are already telling yourself the story that you don't have a powerful story. Some of you are already telling yourself the story that you haven't made enough money to have a story. Some of you are telling yourself a story that you're not good enough to have a story, whatever it may be. And whatever that story is that you're telling yourself, just observe it, just look at it, just evaluate it. Okay, what story am I most committed to? Okay, because here's the reality. You can either talk yourself into a life of frustration and apathy and anger and what could have been, or you can talk yourself into purpose and possibility and experience and wisdom and failing forward and tasting the life that success has to offer over time because you were just willing to start telling yourself a new story. And so if you're really ready to start living into a new possibility, I just want you to commit. I just want you to commit to going out this week, and I'm not going to stretch it, just nothing crazy. I just want you to commit to sharing your story with 5 people this coming week. So Monday through Friday, that's it, just one a day. If you want to do more than one a day, fantastic. But I just want you to commit to sharing your story with 5 people this week. And I'm okay with you sharing it with people that might be, you might have a roommate, you might have a parent. It's okay. Hey, look, I'm working on something. I'm practicing something right now. I'm trying to get better. Would it be okay with you if I practiced sharing my story with you? And don't ask them for feedback. They don't need to judge you. You don't need that kind of feedback. Okay. Do that 5 times. Do that 5 times. Now for the stretch goal, for you overachievers. For you overachievers. Do it 5 times, right? But for you overachievers, just send a voice note. Just send a voice note to the partners that you're working with. Send a voice note saying, hey, I shared my story today with this person. I shared my story today with this person. I shared my story with this person. So even this little stretch for the high achievers isn't that big of a stretch. What am I asking you to do? I'm just asking you to hold yourselves accountable in a really, really gentle, easy way. Okay, so how many of you can do that? How many of you can ask, just drop a 1 in the chat box. How many of you can just share your story with 5 people this week? And every day that you do it, simply send a voice note to whoever you're working with, whoever your partner is, and say, hey, I'm just holding myself accountable today. I shared my story today with Yash. I shared my story today with my roommate, Sammy, whatever it may be, okay? Just as a way to hold yourself accountable. That's it. Doesn't matter if it doesn't sound perfect. It's never gonna sound perfect until one day it's gonna sound perfect. And then you go, oh, that's pretty good. And then guess what? The very next day you'll get humbled because it's going to sound like garbage, because that's the reality and the nature of humanity, is that some days we're in the flow and some days it comes with ease and grace and it's natural and it's no problem. And all of our years of training become present in the moment and you just deliver on a dime. And then there are other days because of our humanity where you just don't. And that's the part that doesn't matter. What matters the most is you go, yep, great, notch on the belt, rite of passage, paying my dues. Who's next? What's next? Where is next for me? Have a great evening, everybody. I'm going to post in the group, what did you learn? Lots of love. Stay safe, stay healthy, and please go spread lots of love. The world certainly could use it. Ciao.